Hello, everyone. I think you may or may not have heard that 2 weeks ago I was diagnosed with terminal throat cancer with less than 6 weeks to live. That's a pretty rough thing to, even for a guy like me that admittedly I have no great love of life. Over the years I sort of concluded that life is something that has to be struggled and endured through. But when I heard terminal cancer, less than 6 weeks, my first thoughts turned to who's going to take care of little Mary. We live in a remote island, Copper Island, up in northern Michigan, where we get anywhere from 250 to over 300 inches of snow every year. And luckily, I managed to acquire some decent John Deere equipment, reliable, but having the equipment to have somebody, an 8-year-old and a 17-year-old woman to handle is a different matter. So I'm worried. I'm worried about a lot of things. Your first reaction when you hear something like this is sort of, I would say, stunned disbelief for a moment. Although I had symptoms of some kind of cancer, I've been losing about 10 pounds a year for the last 10 pounds a year for the last 5 years. But I assumed that it was prostate cancer. And in last fall around Thanksgiving, I got this like swollen gland. And then I started wondering, and I started having problems swallowing, and I lost my voice. And then I started to suspect that it was some kind of perhaps cancer in the throat. Now, I knew I had cancer. I was pretty resigned to the fact that I had cancer, but I didn't know where. And so that wasn't like a baseball bat hit to the head. I just think that my first reaction, who's going to take care of little Mary? And that's the thing that bothers me the most. And as I said, the first couple of days I had hard time focusing. But then I thought, my friend told me that he and his wife, they had known about 3 people that had been diagnosed with cancer with less than 6 months to live, that lived a year and a half, and one guy's still living after 5 years. So, not knowing what's going to happen, I wouldn't go out and buy a 80-foot cabin cruiser, but I decided, I'm not going to sit around and feel sorry for myself and be depressed. My whole life that I can remember, I had problems with depression. Now, then as I advanced in wisdom and grace and became more and more educated, in high school and college, it occurred to me that I just don't, my body's malfunctioning, dysfunctioning, whatever the word is. And it doesn't produce enough of the, I think they're called endorphins and whatever all those happy hormones are. And it's a fact of life. So, ironically, a guy gave me probably the greatest, a graduate, when I was working at Michigan Tech, a graduate student, very smart guy, gave me probably the best advice and a gift that anyone's ever given in their life. He said, I told him I was having, I have problems with depression, and probably through 50 to 70% of the day, but I keep fighting it and I accept it as a curse because I don't have enough of the right chemicals. And he says, you don't have to do this. He said, and I'll tell you, I think I can eradicate depression in your life. Your mind can only think of one thing at a time. We think we can think of multiple things, but we really can't. We switch backwards and forward, diverting our attention. He said, the first thing I would advise to you is, as soon as you get up, to start listening to podcasts. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, if you can't think about two things at a time, if you're listening to a podcast, it's filling your mind with intellectual things, or with music you enjoy, or studying history, you don't really have the ability to let these sad thoughts creep into your life. So I tried it, and I've never, we always hear everybody says, oh, drink more of this, your blood pressure will go down, drink beet juice, stop smoking, which I did, stop drinking caffeine, which I did, and it didn't affect my blood pressure one bit. So I said, I don't even know what a podcast is. I'll look into podcasts. Now, little Mary and we're trying to become podcast creators. So, and it worked. In fact, it worked so well. I get up every morning, I sit on the edge of the bed, and I have a hard time thinking about facing the day. And I turn that YouTube on, and within 10 minutes, I feel fine. And I haven't had a problem with depression in the last 3 years. And I'm just sorry that nobody told me that 20 years ago, or 40 years ago. Because I would have never probably drunk, or even perhaps not smoked. When people smoke for a reason, it's because you have that good feeling that comes in the front of your brain. You can just, if you don't smoke for a couple of days, if you puff off a cigarette, you can just feel they put happy chemicals in there. So, in a lot of ways, I think, had I not been plagued with depression, I probably wouldn't have smoked and drank. I haven't drunk probably in 20 years, but people self-medicate and they do a lot of things they shouldn't, trying to handle problems. So anyway, I resigned. I thought to myself, you know what? I am not going to sit around, lie in bed, feel sorry for myself, or walk around, woe is me. I have cancer, and I'm probably, I smoke, but I never inhaled, and I sort of thought that would prevent me from getting cancer. You didn't want to suck all that stuff in your lungs, so as soon as I smoked, I would blow it out my mouth, and I thought I was less likely to contract cancer. Well, apparently not. I misdiagnosed that. So what do I intend to do? I'm going to try to live the same routine I live every day, that I've been living every day. I'm going to try to work as much as I can, which I can't because I get tired. But it's not going to be a big pity party. And I'm going to try to contribute. Admittedly, I'm afraid. I'm afraid about the pain, how much pain I got. The doctor immediately at the hospital enrolled me into hospice. And the nurse came over. She was very nice. And then the social worker came over, and she was very nice. And then the chaplain called, and he was very nice. And then I talked to Father Gracious over at Sacred Heart, and he's always very nice. So, yeah, do I worry about the future? Yeah, I sure do. I worry about Who's going to take care of Maureen and little Mary? Little Mary loves it here. I love it here. There's no crime. Sure as hell don't want to go back to Chicagoland. I wouldn't want them to go back to Chicagoland. And how rough is the end gonna be? I don't know. It's not very promising. They said the cancer. They gave you one of those CAT scans, and the pathologist said the cancer spread to the base of the brain and to the neck. And I'm thinking, wow, how am I going to survive this? Well, I'm not going to survive, obviously, but how am I going to endure this? And the arrangements have been made for the hospital bed and also for the oxygen machine. So I guess my big thing, am I going to be here on Christmas? I don't know. If I am here, how bad am I going to be? I don't know. And maybe it'll be like teaspoonful by teaspoonful, day by day. I notice certain things. I can't remember things the way I used to remember things. I got on my motorcycle the other day, and it just took about all my might to put my foot on the foot pedal and get my hips over the seat. I drove it about a block and a half, 2 blocks, and I came back. I got off of it and decided I'll never do that again because, when you get older, you usually have multiple problems, and my multiple problem is I had a bad hip. Yeah, originally that's odd because between and I therefore when I went to work every day I used to wear a diaper because the prostate and the urethra or whatever all that stuff is, I would leak and you'd see a stain coming down my pants. So if it's like an old car, not just one thing falls apart. One thing falls apart, then another thing falls apart, and then another thing needs to get repaired, and before you know it, when it starts getting too old, everything starts falling. It used to be sort of a concatenation of events, and then it becomes sort of like everything simultaneously falls apart. So I guess if I had any request to ask any of you, if you'd pray for my happy death. I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid to see what's going to happen before I die. And I'll keep you up to date. Thanks for listening, and I apologize for my voice and the way I look, and I look like Skeletor, and people tell me, you guys, anybody watching this might find it hard to believe, but when girls used to say I was a cute guy. So I'm not very cute now. I look like Uncle Festus. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.